Welcome to Dr. Pepper and Friends, where grit, grace, and wholehearted living come together. And now, here's Dr. Pepper.
Welcome into Dr. Pepper and Friends. The theme of our podcast YouTube channel is where grit and grace come together for wholehearted living. And a part of that is counseling-related episodes that you'll see in the green logos, and then also Bible teaching-related episodes, which are in the red logos. And we are studying the book of Genesis at Fellowship Bible Church on Wednesday mornings at 6:15 for breakfast and coffee and 6:30 for teaching. And this is a men's Bible study, but anyone is welcome to listen to the show, to the podcast, and tune in and just get some good stuff from Genesis. There'll be some other teachers besides me along the way. But we thank you so much for tuning in. And if you want to check out some of the other shows, you're on the right channel, and you can do that through YouTube or Apple or Spotify or Amazon Music, any place that you find your podcast. Tune in, and I hope you will find this encouraging in your journey.
Good to see everybody today. How many of you, this is your first time to come to this Wednesday morning Bible study? All right, well, welcome. We're really glad you're here. So my name is Pepper Pratt, and I have the privilege of being one of the guys that teach, and there'll be some others that will teach this semester, and it's just a joy for me. This is year 6 for us. We started off, I was thinking, we started off in the Gospels, and we did it in a strange order. I think we did John, and then Mark, and then Luke, and then Matthew, and then we did Romans this last year. So this year we're doing a few things a little different. We're in an Old Testament book, and I'll say a little bit more about that in just a minute. But a couple of other things that we're doing different this year. One is there's going to be a Facebook group for this Bible study for those that are participating in this. You'll get a text a little bit later today that has an invitation link to it if you want to be a part of a Facebook group. There's not going to be 1 million posts a day or anything like that unless you do. I'm not going to post 1 million times a day. I'll post probably once a week. I'll usually post a question. We'll talk about that in a minute. And you can still kind of chime in if you want to add to that conversation on the Facebook group. You can do that. And then really it's going to be an opportunity for you to just encourage each other, for you to offer any prayer requests if you've got anything that you want the guys to pray for and pray about. One of the things that I would encourage you to do, we're going to be in Genesis. So if there are things that you come across during the week that might pertain to Genesis, we're all about some beauty and creation and the beasts of the field and the birds of the air and the fish of the sea. So if you catch a big fish and it reminds you of Genesis and you want to put it on there, that'll be all right too. I'm going to, I think even smoked meat is a good idea, right? So who knows what you may put on there. I'm already showing my butt on the Facebook page. I've got 2 on my Traeger that I took a picture of, and they're on the Facebook page already. So I've got 2 smoked butts that are on there. So whatever you decide you want to post on there will be fine, but let's try to keep it encouraging and pertaining somewhat at least to what we're studying week in and week out. Another thing that we're going to do is we're going to record each of these this year. So if you're out, there's going to be an opportunity for you to catch up if you want to. My clinic, the Pratt Clinic, started a podcast about a month ago. And there's 2 series on the podcast. The name of the podcast is called Dr. Pepper and Friends. Okay, and it's got a green Dr. Pepper label. Okay, that's the logo for it. So if you go to YouTube and put in Dr. Pepper and Friends or Apple or Spotify, any of the places that you get your podcasts, it'll show up. The green ones are all the clinic podcasts, so if you want to listen to those, you can. But the red ones are all Bible teaching ones, okay? So I'm just finishing up a series that I've been filling in for a pastor at another church, and I'm finishing up a series there. These will all start being on there starting tonight, okay? It'll be on there. So if you want to subscribe to that, in case you missed, you'll get a reminder for that, or just go to it, and it should be on by Wednesday night or Thursday at the latest from this morning's Bible study. So if you miss and you want to catch up, you can do that. So Mike, and I'll also post that link for the podcast on the Facebook page too, so everybody will get that, okay? Make sense? So those are a couple of things that are new, but everything else, we're just going to dig in. And one of the things that we do is we start off with a question, and as we go through the text, you get some information that might inform you about the question, and then we stop at about 7:15, 7:10, 7:15 to give you time to talk at your tables about the way that you would answer the question. So this morning, here's the question, okay? In Genesis 1, and this is what we're going to look at. In Genesis 1, it shows a God who speaks order into chaos, right? So is his image bearer, what is it that you need today? Do you need light in some dark places? Do you need order in some places that feel disorganized or somewhat chaotic? Or do you need fruitfulness in your life? Or do you need rest in your life? I think August in many ways is kind of a time of fresh starts. It's a time where we kind of pull up. We've got a lot of new things starting. We've got a new church year that started. You've got kids and grandkids that are going back to school right now. There's just something that kind of feels like you take a breath, and you know, kind of most of the first half of the year is over, and you start thinking about how you want to finish the second half of the year. So what do you need today? Okay, so we have a God who speaks order into chaos. You are his image bearer. So what do you need? If you take a deep breath in and allow God to fill you with what you need, what might that be? So that's what we'll talk about a little bit later on. So today we jump into Genesis, and this is our first time in this Bible study having an Old Testament book. Some of you wonder and have asked me at times, what are some of the sources that I study and that kind of thing. I mentioned last year when we were talking about doing Genesis to check out the Bible Project. They do a really good job with Genesis. It won't be exclusively from the Bible Project, but that's one of my sources. I love Dr. Constable's notes. If you've never seen that, if you've been studying, I love that online commentary that you find in Scripture. John Walton is another source. There are other commentators that I'll seek out occasionally too. So those are some of my sources. But one of the things that I love about the Bible Project, this is kind of their tagline, especially when it comes to Old Testament books. They talk about the Old Testament, and particularly Genesis, is a unified story that leads to Jesus, right? So throughout this study, we're not just going to study the text, but we're going to look at the themes that we find in Genesis that point us to Jesus. Because God in his brilliance has saw fit to do that. He saw fit to give us some foreshadowing and some little reminders and hints and teasers of what's to come. And we're going to see that even today in some of these early chapters. We're going to see how that goes. So this is kind of how we will approach Genesis. So let's kind of jump in. So Genesis, of course, the word itself means beginnings. Okay, that's the word Genesis. That's what that means. And this chapter that we're going to look at is not just the beginning of the Bible, but it's the beginning of everything that we know. It's the beginning of creation. It's the beginning of order as we know it. It's when order got organized, so to speak. It's the beginning of humanity. It's the beginning of purpose. And I think even studying this in a fresh kind of way for me, just seeing chapter 1, I see that God intended something from the very beginning. I mean, for every single thing that he created, there was a function and there was a purpose, and especially with human beings, there was a purpose and a function that we were meant for. And if you don't walk away with anything else, okay, today, I hope you will walk away with a reminder that God meant something. When he knit you together in your mother's womb, he meant something by you. Okay? You are an image bearer of his. You reflect who he is. And there is something unique about you that he meant when he created you, because that is consistent with the way that he created everything. Okay? And we will stand in awe of just how he did that. But we'll even see the beginnings of the backstory of sin. Okay? Even in chapter 1, and as we look in these early chapters in Genesis, we'll see kind of the backstory of that. So some main themes that we see in Genesis. We see God is the sovereign creator. He's compared, I think when Moses is writing this, we'll talk about Moses in a minute. I think there's some competing theologies of the day. So there were probably a lot of pagan worshipers that were pointing to the sky and pointing to the sun and pointing to the moon and saying, this is our God, right? These were the things that were happening. So in some of the wording that you see Moses using as he's describing this, you almost hear him refuting some of the pagan ideas of worship. So we see God being described and portrayed as the sovereign creator. And what he does is he brings order out of chaos. Right? So he digs in, and the created things are now not just there to be revered, okay? But these created things are now instruments for his purpose. They have a function. There's something that he uses them for. And humanity is made in his image for that same kind of purpose. And humanity is made for relationships. And creation reflects his goodness and his glory. So we see this from the very beginning. So we kind of have some sections when we approach Genesis. The first 11 chapters are kind of the creation history. We see creation, we see the fall, we see the flood, we see the origin of nations, okay, in these first 11 chapters. And then in chapters 12 through 50, it's the patriarchs, okay? So we see the stories of the founding fathers of faith. Now we're going to pull up at the end of the first semester at chapter 19. So we're going to get started with Abraham, and we're going to get going and discovering some things about his journey and his story. But then we're going to pull up with this, massive cliffhanger ending in December with the story of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, so that's where we're going to end, and then we're going to pick up from there and cover the rest of the patriarchs. Maybe not the rest of the patriarchs, but some of the patriarchs in the spring. And I may be getting ahead of myself on my schedule. I think that's where I saw us going. So we've talked about doing all this in 1 year, and we've talked about doing this in over 2 years too. So we'll see where it takes us. So the big idea that we have is that Genesis tells us where we've come from. Okay, Genesis tells us why we exist. Genesis tells us who God is, and without it, we lose the whole foundation for our identity and our meaning, because this is the question that every man has. Okay, who am I? Where did I come from? Why do I exist? Right? So, and I almost thought about the story, the question for today just being, where did I come from? And if you want to talk about that today, where you came from, talk about that. And don't say Genesis 1. Okay, we know that. All right, you came from Genesis 1. You were created, but no, where'd you come from? I came from Chester County. There's something about that. Right? God maybe meant something by placing me in Chester County. Who knows? All right? So you may want to include that just in your introductions this morning. All right, so who wrote Genesis? Well, Moses is kind of the one that we look at that is the traditional view. There are other ideas that maybe there were others that may have contributed. There are multiple sources, but I think everybody kind of goes back and points to Moses was the one that wrote the first 5 books of the Moses' law, basically. So the Torah is what the first 5 books are, and Moses is the one that was attributed. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought of this question, but a question that just kind of occurred to me is, well, how did he know? How did he know all these things happen? We wasn't there. All right, so it's pretty clear by the time Moses comes around, there's been a lot of other things that have happened. Okay, so how did he know? Well, there are ideas about that too. So one idea is that it was just a simple dictation from God to Moses, that inspired by the Holy Spirit, almost as Moses received the 10 Commandments, that God told Moses the things that happened in the beginning, and Moses wrote those things down as God was inspiring him and sharing these things with him. There are also ideas that there were oral traditions that were passed down throughout the patriarchs and throughout Adam and Eve and all the generations that you see. In fact, you'll see at times phrases such as these were the generations. Okay, and we're going to see this in the next few chapters, in about chapter 5 or so. These were the generations, and there is some idea that maybe there were writings that got passed down from these generations, or some kind of official story that Moses kind of compiled together, and in conjunction with being inspired by the Holy Spirit, these were some of the sources that we had. But here's the thing that I know, is that regardless of how he learned these things, the thing that we do know is that God is creator. And our lives must start there. Our lives must start with him. All right? So let's dig into the text this morning. In chapter 1, in verse 1, this is just a good starting place. All right? So beginning in the beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. There are moments that, and I say this from time to time, there are moments that I wish I could have been present for. This may be one of them, okay? There is something that gives me chills just thinking about this moment, okay? Where, all of this creative power was about to be unleashed. And it was quiet, and there was nothing but the void and the darkness over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. That scene just is just awe-inspiring to me, right? So this is where it begins, and God is central in this story. So we're introduced at the very beginning to God. In the beginning, God. And one commentator said that this opening verse is kind of a theological thunderclap, where God alone is eternal and creation is not. He speaks creation into existence. Now, we're going to experiment with a little bit of Hebrew, okay? I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but there's some Hebrew words that we're going to get to. And it says the earth was tohu vabohu, okay? So formless and void, all right? So darkness hovered over the face of the earth. And this hovering just conveys this tender, powerful presence of God that is about to do creative things. That gets everything started, and even bringing function from disorder, and it's not just a matter of creating matter. Okay, God is creating order, and this order has a purpose and it has a function. Right. So here's something that I want you to just kind of take away, just kind of an application in these two verses. God doesn't avoid your chaos. That part of your life that kind of may feel chaotic. Would you believe that perhaps the Spirit of God is just hovering over that chaos, ready to bring order into that mess that maybe you feel like you have that can't be organized in any kind of way? He wants to do that. And the ways that he may do that may be more creative than you could ever even imagine, right? Look at verse 3. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and God saw that it was good. And God separated the light from the darkness, and he called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. So God speaks. The light pierces the darkness, and his word is this creative power. Light is something that symbolizes this order in life, and it symbolizes God's presence. And we see that throughout Scripture. We see that especially in the Gospel of John. Okay, if you trace that theme of light throughout, that's what you'll find. But evening and morning mark time itself. Okay, he says that God establishes this in such a way there's this rhythm that begins to take place. And then we come across this phrase, and we're going to see this all through chapter 1, where it says, "And he saw the light, and it was what? And it was good." Okay, so this word, this Hebrew word, is the word tov, T-O-V. Okay, and we're gonna meet another word coming up that has to do with the opposite of that. Okay, and it's the word ra. Okay, so try to remember this. So you're going to have tov and ra. If you underline words, these are good words to underline. Good and the word evil. Okay, now you're going to see all through chapter 1 where God created and he beheld it. He looked back, took a step back and said, "Behold, this is good." Okay, and this is good. And he created this, and this is good. And he created this, and this is very good. When was the first time something was not good? Something was not tov? What? Yeah, so we find that in chapter 2, verse 18, where it says it's not good for man to be alone. But before that, we find the other word. We find ra in verse 17 of chapter 2. And that's where we're introduced to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay? Now, here's the theme that we're going to see throughout Genesis, because by the time we get to the end of Genesis, so I'm going to give you the spoiler alert here. Okay? By the time we get to the end of Genesis, we've been introduced this idea of Tov and Ra early, and we're going to see this especially in chapter 2 and chapter 3. And then we're going to fast forward all the way to the end of Genesis, and there's this literary beauty that you see, because one of the last lines in Genesis, after Joseph has had all of his story, and his brothers have come and they've bowed down to him, and he's blessed them, and they feel awful, and he's reconciling with them. In Genesis 50:20, Joseph comes in and he says, what men have meant for Tov, God has meant for, or what men have meant for Ra, God has meant for Tov. So what men have meant for evil, God has meant for good. So this good and evil is this theme that we see all the way through Genesis, and we're introduced to it right here, because the thing that we know, is that, and this is kind of the point, is that when God takes something that's nothing and He speaks, there's good that comes from that. And even in I think the theme in Genesis when we get to chapter 50 is that God can even take the things that men meant for evil and turn them into good. So in chapter 1, God brings light into the darkness and it's good, and He brings fruit into barrenness and it's good. He brings order into chaos and it is good, and He even brings life into death. Right? So this is the God that we serve. So think about, where do you need God's light to shine into places that may feel very confusing for you right now? Verse 6, and God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. So there's this separation of the waters above and below. There's this creation of atmosphere. God is assigning function. He's creating this breathable space for His creation. There's this, again, kind of this rejection of some of the pagan myths that the sky was God, and God is creating sky. He's creating the atmosphere for a purpose. And I think one of the things that we can kind of take away from that is that the boundaries that God has created for us are not restrictive, but they are given to us to make life flourish. And this is the purpose that these boundaries that God is making, even in creation, are serving. And then in verse 9, and God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together in one place, and let dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together He called the seas. And God saw that it was good. And then God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees and bearing fruit, which is their seed, according to its kind. And it was so. And the earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their kinds, and the trees bearing fruit, in which their seed each according to its kind. You hear that phrase being repeated. I'll come back to that. Each according to its kind, 3 times in this passage. And God saw that it was good. And then there was evening and there was morning, the third day. All right. So the seeds gather, the vegetation sprouts. How many of you have had a garden? You've had a vegetable garden at some point in your life. Or maybe you were like me. You were a garden slave growing up. That's what I was. I was a garden slave. But I even after I grew up, I had a garden. I've had a garden for a number of years. I don't have one this year. I had one the last couple of years. But to me, every time I plant a vegetable garden, I see a miracle that just unfolds right in front of me. I put a seed down into the ground, into dirt, okay? And at some point, this seed breaks open, and perhaps some would argue even dies to some point. And there are things that sprout out into the dirt that kind of become a plant that begins to grow up, and it pierces the surface of the ground and then reaches up toward the sun. And at some point, it begins to have blooms on it that wind up being food for me, right? Isn't that crazy? I mean, just the brilliance of that design. And that phrase that's repeated throughout this, as God is creating this, Moses is careful to point out, it's each according to its kind. Each according to its kind. Each according to its kind. There is intention. There is variety that God sought to give to us and to His creation that had a function and it had a purpose. And this world that had been barren is now becoming fruitful as we're reading this creation narrative. And it's kind of this foretaste of humanity's calling. We're going to be called to be stewards of this and to be people who are taking care of this place that God is creating. So God provides abundantly for us, and He's trustworthy to be able to meet our needs. Verse 14. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made 2 great lights, the great light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light to the earth, to rule over the day and to rule over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was the evening and there was the morning, the 4th day. So in day 4, we have the sun and the moon and the stars. We have these celestial bodies to mark the seasons and to mark time itself. I think the thing that's amazing about this is that from the very beginning, God gave a purpose to set rhythms in our life. I mean, consider your rhythms. I want to come back to that in just a minute. But I mean, I don't know if you've ever even considered something like the miracle of melatonin, okay? I mean, you and I have these circadian rhythms that we're driven by these rhythms that have to do with light and sleep. And we have this kind of internal clock, that's this 24-hour cycle that we seem to have. And our sleep is regulated, our hormones are regulated, our wakefulness, our body temperature, our digestion, even repair at cellular levels takes place according to these rhythms that God set in motion at creation. Many of you know a little bit about melatonin, but it's this hormone that's secreted by a gland that is just kind of central to this whole rhythm that we have. And as the light fades, melatonin increases, and then as the light reappears, melatonin decreases, and that's what drives our desire to sleep, right? And when all of that's happening, there's this programming that God has set in motion inside of our bodies to anticipate sunrise and to anticipate sunset. And it prepares us while we're sleeping, and we don't even understand all of how it happens. But while we're sleeping, it prepares us for this optimal functioning, right? And you have all of these other mechanisms that are taking place, and there's hormone repair that takes place, and there are certain hormones that drip at certain times of our sleep cycles, and all of these kinds of things. And if you ever get off, even slightly, you notice it. So if you've ever worked third shift, or you've ever just kind of traveled where you've had jet lag, or you've had where you've been up for a couple of days in a row, your body feels it, and you know that something's just not right until you're able to get that rhythm reestablished. So I would ask you to kind of consider this morning, right now, God has intended you to be a man of rhythm. I don't mean you can dance, okay? Doug can dance now. I don't mean you can dance, all right? I just mean that God has intended you to be a man of rhythm, that there are rhythms that are good. There are rhythms that need to take place in your life. What's out of rhythm for you? What might, just as we're being inspired by this creation narrative, what might be a rhythm that God wants to reestablish in your life? All right, let's move on. I love this verse. Psalm 104:19, I had this in my notes, but He made the moon to mark the seasons, and the sun knows its time for the setting. I love that, right? Okay, let's look at verse 20. And God said, let the waters swarm and with swarms of living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning the fifth day. So day 5, God fills the waters and the skies with life. And he gives this first blessing. He blessed them to be fruitful and to multiply. So it wasn't a one and done. He didn't necessarily create these creatures just to inhabit the earth, but he created them to populate the earth. That was a part of the purpose that comes along here. And when you look at this and you see this idea of multiplication, it's directly connected to God's blessing. So growth and repopulation and multiplication is something that is directly tied to the way that God chose to bless creation from the very beginning. Creation moved from being empty to overflowing with abundance. That's God's purpose, is to overflow with abundance for us to be able to see His creative activity in our lives. His heart is for us to flourish. And I don't think it's just the animals on this planet. I think it's human beings. It's our internal world. It's our external world. God desires for us to grow and for us to flourish. Verse 24, and God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. So God creates the beasts, the livestock, the creeping things, all with variety. All with this phenomenon of intelligent design, that there is form and there is function and there is purpose in every single detailed item that He creates in this. And it kind of reinforces this ordered structure when you hear again, probably 4 or 5 times, according to their kinds, that you see in this. I don't know if you realize this, but even some of those animals that you think shouldn't exist have some kind of function. All right. We were doing some landscaping at our house, and some guys that were helping us sent me a picture and said, man, we found 6 snakes in your flower bed. And I'm like, oh man, 6 snakes. Well, what they don't know is I got a thing for snakes. I think snakes are kind of cool, right? And I said, well, what kind of snakes were they? He said, they were bad snakes. And I said, well, what'd you do? And I don't think I really wanted to know what they did, right? But they sent me a picture of one of them, and it was a Decay's brown snake. Does anybody know what a Decay's brown snake is? A Decay's brown snake is really cool because it takes care of insects, it takes care of mice that are up close to the house. It's very harmless, okay? If you want to learn more, okay, if you're into Facebook, go to, this is one of the coolest pages ever, the Tennessee Snake Identification page on Facebook. They'll post 1 million times a day, all right? But I thought I knew a little bit about snakes. I didn't know anything about snakes, okay? I've always pointed to these snakes, and, man, that's a copperhead. It wasn't a copperhead, it was just a common water snake. Right? And they look a lot alike. And ones that I think, man, that's going to kill somebody, it's just a gray rat snake. Well, I learned a few things about snakes. I'm still not sure about mosquitoes. I'm not sure if they have any purpose whatsoever. That's a heavenly question I'm going to have one of these days. But there's not anything that God didn't make according to its kind that didn't have some kind of function. Right? So this kind of sets the stage now for humanity and the dominion that God has called us to. So look at verse 26. Then God said, let us make man in our own image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in His own image, and in the image of God He created them. Male and female He created them. So we're made in God's image. Humanity is distinct. We're the only ones that are in God's likeness. Okay, and this was God's intention in this. Now, I don't know if you notice this. Just a little sidebar worth pointing out here. But do you notice how it's phrased there? Then God said, "Who makes it? Who makes them? Us." Okay, so I was curious about that, and I mean the obvious thing, especially since we kind of have full revelation. As Christians, we know about the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And we know John chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was with God from the beginning. So we know there was some plurality that was in the heavenly realms in that moment, but is that what Moses actually meant? Well, probably. I think that's where the commentators seem to land. But some other ideas are that often when there was a reference to a kingly decree, a royal decree, there would be times that there would be a plurality in that decree that we have decided such and such, which really usually just means the king has taken counsel with himself, right? So there's the possibility of that. There's sometimes this self-deliberation is kind of a part of what it is. But I think most things kind of point out to this is a hint of what is to come. This is a hint of revelation that's yet to come, that this is actually possibly referring to the plurality of the Godhead. Okay. Now, the Jewish scholars would say that he's really referring to God and the angels, that he had already created the angels. So this deliberation that he's taking in the heavenly courts may be with just God and the angels making this creative act and this creative decision. All right. So, but the bottom line is that God created, okay, and he gave us a purpose. He gave each man a certain dignity and a certain responsibility before God. So our purpose in all of this is to have dominion over creation. Let's look at verse 28. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the flesh and the fish of the sea, or over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit, and you shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has breath of life, I have given every green plant for food," and it was so. So be fruitful, multiply, fill, subdue. These are all the words that are being extended to human beings in this moment. And dominion is something that's stewardship. It's not exploitation, okay, but it's stewardship. And our role is to extend God's order, okay, throughout creation. And our work and our family and our leadership are all things that are sacred callings that God has given us to rule in, right? And as a part of that, it's to serve in with a certain amount of sacrifice, and not just being the boss of all of those things, right? So we're to be stewards of those blessings and those resources that God has given us in a way that we extend his blessing and we extend his order in all of those things that he's called us to. All right, and we kind of wrap up here in verse 31. And God saw everything that was made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning the sixth day. So God delights in his work, and he takes a step back and he says, all of this is very good. And he looks at the harmony that is there, and he is able to say mucho tov. Okay, this is kind of what he says. I combined a little Spanish and Hebrew there at one time. So this is very good. Okay, is his final appraisal of the situation. So walking away today, just a couple of things. Okay, we begin with God in everything. Okay, this is our starting place. That his creative order and his creativity is where we began, and we invite him into our chaos to bring order. He specializes in that. But we are to live as stewards, not owners, not the boss. He's the boss, okay? But we're to live as stewards, and we're to embrace our calling as image bearers, right? So for us to be able to step into that calling that God has given us. And I think we pause in these moments of of worship of an intelligent designer. So I hope as you go through this next week that you'll just kind of notice, right? As you're driving, I mean, I noticed this morning, and you would expect with the cool temps this morning and the warm ground to see fog, right? But as I turned from the bypass onto Ashport Road and that little field that's starting to be developed here, right there, I mean, there was just a fog that was just kind of setting in on that. And I just noticed the beauty of God's creation. See where you can find that, okay, throughout this next week. See where you can find His creative work and His creative activity. Maybe it's in nature. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just Him speaking order into chaotic places, Him shining light into dark places. Maybe that's where you need Him this week. So that's our question. Genesis 1 shows us a God who speaks order into chaos. As His image bearer, what do you need today? Okay, what do you need as you face this second half of the year, this finishing well throughout 2025? Do you need light? Do you need order? Do you need fruitfulness? Do you need rest? What is it that you may need in your life right now? So any other highlights that you feel like stood out from the text today, share those with your group. Pray for each other before you go. You may take some prayer requests and just say, hey, how can I pray for you this week? And do that for one another, and then close it out, and try to close out by 7:30 so folks can get out off to work. And we'll see you next week.